This doctrine has been codified into a multi-domain operational framework known as the Phantom Strike Protocol. Its core principle is simple and absolute. The most effective and lasting victory is one in which the enemy army is not defeated by a visible external force, but is instead induced to defeat itself. The objective is not the destruction of its tanks and artillery, but the complete collapse of its moral, psychological, and systemic cohesion. The protocol operates on the periphery, in the shadows of perception. It is a war waged not on a physical battlefield, but in the minds of the enemy soldiers, in the integrity of their communication systems, in the stability of their economy, and in the trust between the population and the state. It is the science of turning an adversary's own strengths into critical vulnerabilities. A conflict prosecuted under this doctrine is often not even recognized as a war by the target entity until the final stages of its collapse. The actions are deniable, the actors are invisible, and the effects are designed to appear as the natural result of the enemy's own internal failures and incompetence. It is the art of destroying an army without anyone ever seeing the hand that delivered the fatal blow. This is not a single action, but a protracted, multi-phased campaign. Each phase builds upon the last, creating a cascade of systemic failures that culminates in the enemy's paralysis and eventual implosion. It is a clinical and patient methodology, requiring a deep and granular understanding of the target system as a living, breathing organism. The first and most critical phase of the Phantom Strike Protocol is the intelligence preparation of the battlespace, or IPB. This is the silent, invisible foundation upon which the entire operation is built. Before a single active measure is taken, the target system must be mapped, dissected, and understood with the precision of a surgeon studying a patient. This is not merely military intelligence in the classical sense of counting tanks and identifying unit locations. The IPB for this doctrine is a holistic, multidimensional analysis of the entire enemy society. It targets not just the army, but the culture, the economy, the political structure, and the information ecosystem that underpins it. The objective is to identify the critical vulnerabilities and centers of gravity of the target state. These are not always military. A critical vulnerability might be a deep-seated ethnic or religious fault line within the population. It might be a critical dependency on a single imported resource, a corrupt and distrusted political class, or the psychological profile of a single key military commander. Intelligence assets, including human sources, signals intelligence, and cyber reconnaissance teams, are deployed to create this comprehensive map. They identify the formal and informal power structures, the key influencers, the societal grievances, and the channels through which information flows. This is the painstaking work of finding the hairline fractures in the enemy's foundation. This deep understanding allows for the precise and efficient application of force in the subsequent phases. Action without this level of intelligence is not strategy, it is mere gambling. The Phantom Strike Protocol does not gamble. Every action is calibrated and targeted for maximum psychological and systemic impact, based on the vulnerabilities identified in the IPB. With the battlespace comprehensively mapped, the second phase begins, psychological conditioning. This is the first active, albeit nonviolent, stage of the operation. Its purpose is to shape the human terrain, to prepare the minds of the enemy soldiers and the civilian population for the events to come. This is the domain of psychological operations, or PSYOP. The core of this phase is the dissemination of carefully crafted narratives delivered through a variety of channels. These operations utilize three distinct categories of propaganda: white, gray, and black. White propaganda consists of truthful, factual information attributed to a clear source. This is used to build credibility and to highlight the genuine failures, corruption, or brutality of the enemy regime. Its power lies in its undeniable truth. Gray propaganda is information whose source is ambiguous and whose content is a mixture of truth and plausible speculation. It often takes the form of leaks or reports from concerned insiders. Its purpose is to sow doubt, to create suspicion, and to introduce narratives that the regime cannot easily refute. Black propaganda is the most insidious. It is false information that is deliberately attributed to a false source. For example, a leaflet campaign designed to look like it comes from a dissident faction within the enemy army can be used to create paranoia and to encourage internal purges, weakening the army's command structure from within. These PSYOP messages are not a blunt instrument. They are micro-targeted. Based on the intelligence gathered in Phase 1, specific messages are designed for specific units, specific regions, or even specific individuals. A message for a poorly paid conscript will be different from a message for a zealous officer. The objective is to amplify existing grievances. It is to create a sense of hopelessness and futility, to erode the soldier's belief in his cause, his leaders, and his comrades. It is to make the idea of surrender or desertion seem like a logical and honorable choice. This phase is the slow-acting poison that weakens the enemy's morale long before the first shot is fired. As the psychological environment is being conditioned, the third phase commences in parallel: information and cyber warfare. If PSYOP targets the heart and soul of the army, this phase targets its central nervous system, its ability to command, control, communicate, and gather intelligence. The primary objective is the disruption of the enemy's command and control, or C2, infrastructure. This is achieved through a variety of means, from direct cyber attacks on military communication networks to the physical sabotage of fiber optic cables and broadcast towers by covert assets. The goal is to create a dense and impenetrable fog of war for the enemy commander. He can no longer trust the information he receives, nor can he be certain that his orders are being delivered. He becomes deaf, dumb, and blind, attempting to command a body that no longer responds to his will. Simultaneously, information operations are deployed across the digital landscape. Social media platforms are used to spread disinformation, to amplify the PSYOP narratives, and to create the illusion of widespread dissent or panic through the use of automated bot networks. Digital assets can micro-target individual soldiers with demoralizing messages delivered directly to their personal devices. A soldier in the field might receive an anonymous message showing that his wife is struggling back home, or a video depicting the surrender of a neighboring unit, even if that surrender never actually happened. The informational and cyber domains are where the modern battle is first won or lost. An army that cannot communicate, that cannot trust its own intelligence, and whose soldiers are being psychologically besieged is an army that is already on the verge of collapse, even if its physical strength remains intact. With the enemy's mind and nervous system under assault, the fourth and most critical phase of the protocol is initiated: the unconventional warfare catalyst. The Phantom Strike doctrine does not rely on the deployment of a conventional, visible army. To do so would be to abandon the principle of invisibility. Instead, it works by, with, and through an indigenous force. Based on the intelligence gathered in the IPB, a suitable local partner is identified. This could be a pre-existing political opposition group, a disenfranchised ethnic minority, or a nascent resistance movement. This group becomes the surrogate, the physical instrument through which the protocol will be executed. At this stage, small, highly specialized teams of Special Operations Forces are covertly infiltrated into the operational area. These are the phantoms of the protocol. Their presence is never acknowledged, and their numbers are minuscule, often no more than a few dozen operators. Their mission is not to engage in direct combat. They are not there to fight the enemy army themselves. Their mission is to act as a catalyst, to transform the local surrogate force from a disorganized group into a potent and effective guerrilla army. They are the trainers, the advisors, and the logisticians of the resistance. These soft teams bring expertise in tactics, communications, intelligence gathering, and medicine. Most importantly, they act as the secure link through which the surrogate force can be supplied with the necessary arms, ammunition, and funding to prosecute a sustained campaign. They are a force multiplier of immense power. This phase is the core of the doctrine's deniability and efficiency. The fighting is done by a local force, motivated by their own grievances. The external power remains unseen, its involvement a matter of rumor and speculation. The enemy finds itself fighting not a foreign invader, but a popular uprising, a far more difficult and politically fraught proposition. Once the surrogate force is trained, equipped, and organized, the fifth phase begins, the guerrilla campaign. This is the phase where the systemic decay begins to manifest in physical violence. But it is a specific and carefully calculated form of violence. The guerrilla force does not engage in conventional set-piece battles. To do so would be suicide against a numerically and technologically superior army. Instead, they adhere to the classic principles of guerrilla warfare. They strike at the enemy's weakest points and then vanish back into the civilian population. Their primary targets are not enemy combat units, but the soft underbelly of the army, its supply lines, its communication nodes, its command posts, and its key leaders. An ambush on a fuel convoy is more valuable than an attack on a platoon of infantry, for it can immobilize an entire battalion. Every action is designed for maximum psychological impact. The assassination of a feared commander creates a vacuum of leadership and sows terror. The sabotage of a key bridge isolates a garrison, making it feel vulnerable and abandoned. The goal is to make the enemy feel that he is nowhere safe. This forces the conventional army into a reactive posture. It must disperse its forces to guard thousands of potential targets, thinning its lines and making it more vulnerable. The soldiers become occupiers in a hostile land, unable to distinguish friend from foe, their morale eroding under the strain of constant, low-level warfare and the fear of an invisible enemy. In concert with the guerrilla campaign, the sixth phase is executed: economic warfare. An army cannot fight without a stable economy to support it. This phase is designed to attack the enemy's material and financial ability to sustain the conflict. This can take many forms. International sanctions can be orchestrated to cut off the enemy regime from global markets and financial systems. Covert operations can be used to disrupt the export of the enemy's key commodities, depriving the state of its primary source of revenue. Cyber warfare can be used to target the enemy's banking system, to create inflation, or to disrupt the distribution of food and fuel on the home front. The goal is to create a sense of economic crisis, to make the war an unbearable burden on the civilian population. This economic pressure has a direct impact on the army in the field. Soldiers may not receive their pay. Their equipment may fall into disrepair due to a lack of spare parts. The letters they receive from home will speak of shortages and hardship, further eroding their will to fight for the regime. An army that is underfed, undersupplied, and worried about the welfare of its families is an army that is losing its cohesion. Economic warfare is the slow, grinding pressure that breaks the logistical backbone of the enemy war machine. At this point, the seventh phase begins, the Cascade of Collapse. This is not a phase that is actively initiated, but rather the synergistic and inevitable outcome of the preceding 6 phases. The multiple, coordinated pressures on the enemy system begin to feed off one another, creating a rapid and catastrophic failure. The PSYOP messages of hopelessness and dissent, which may have been dismissed at first, now seem to be validated by the reality on the ground. The soldiers see the successful guerrilla attacks, they feel the lack of supplies, and they hear of the chaos back home. The propaganda begins to feel like truth. The command and control systems, already degraded by cyber attacks, are completely overwhelmed by the decentralized and unpredictable nature of the guerrilla threat. Orders are lost, intelligence is faulty, and units become isolated and cut off. The army ceases to function as a coordinated entity. Individual soldiers, their morale shattered by PSYOP, their bodies weakened by a lack of supplies, and their minds terrified by an invisible enemy, begin to make individual decisions. They desert, they surrender at the first opportunity. In some cases, units may even mutiny against their officers. The army begins to rot from the inside out. This is the essence of the Phantom Strike. The enemy army is not defeated by a single, powerful blow from a visible opponent. It is defeated by 1,000 small cuts, delivered from every domain simultaneously: the psychological, the informational, the military, and the economic. The true strike is the moment that the enemy's systemic cohesion finally breaks. It is the point of irreversible collapse. The victory is achieved not when the last enemy soldier is defeated in battle, but when the enemy's will to exist as an organized, fighting force is completely and utterly shattered. The architects of this victory remain unseen. The intelligence analysts, the PSYOP specialists, the cyber warriors, and the handful of SOP advisors are the true authors of the enemy's demise. But the credit for the victory is given to the local surrogate force, preserving the deniability of the external power. The Phantom remains a ghost. This protocol represents the future of conflict, a paradigm shift away from the industrial age model of warfare. Future conflicts between sophisticated actors will be less about the clash of great armies on open plains and more about these protracted, asymmetric, and multi-domain campaigns of systemic disruption. The battlefield is no longer a geographical location, it is the entirety of the enemy society. The weapons are no longer just bombs and bullets, they are information, psychology, economics, and the cultivation of an indigenous will to resist. The ultimate weapon in this new form of conflict is not a hypersonic missile or a stealth bomber. It is a deep, clinical, and unsentimental understanding of the human and systemic vulnerabilities of an adversary, and the patient, disciplined application of precise pressure to those vulnerabilities until the entire structure collapses. The war is won not with a bang, but with a whisper, a whispered rumor, a corrupted line of code, a quiet meeting in a dark alley. It is the victory of the unseen, the triumph of the phantom strike.